Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at our live Zoom webinar, U&AI, Designing Our Future. We're really glad to have you join us today. My name is Joe Lynch, and listen, I know these are crazy times. There's a lot going on, but I think this is going to be a very good use of everybody's time. We have a great panel, and we're going to have a great discussion. So very happy to have Pallav Sharda, who is the global lead of healthcare products and strategy at Google. Pallav has all sorts of great experience. He is the author of a book, Before Disrupting Healthcare. I've read it. I highly recommend it. Very good for anyone who's innovating within the medtech space and wants to make sure they basically have down kind of the essential vocabulary, a decent sense of the frameworks that drive healthcare. It's a very good book. He's also, Paulo's been the founder of multiple startups. He's been on faculty at Northwestern University, and then has industry experience at Omnicell, at GE Healthcare, and has also driven medtech technology at Kaiser, and has an MBA from Northwestern, master's from Columbia in med informatics, and has the equivalent of an MD degree from Delhi University. So Paul, so great to have you join us. How are you doing? And why don't you share a little bit about your own software experience, maybe a fiasco story or some great project that you've been pleased to be a part of?
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the chance for being here. I'm doing well, thank you. And I'm sure, just like everybody else, adjusting to the new lifestyle we all have. And the only silver lining is I've been getting more miles under my belt from running, because my commute has gone down to zero. I have more time. I think a fiasco, definitely one that I can't forget, is from my startup days when I was at Dovetail. We had gotten a very precious meeting with the Apple engineering leadership in Cupertino. And I was expecting 2 people to give the demo to, and 15 showed up, and everybody had heavier titles. And the day was memorable because nothing worked. After about 30 seconds, our device gave up and my slides wouldn't load. And I ended up drawing stuff on the whiteboard and just talking to them. I just remember a very gracious room that just stayed there for 50 minutes for basically a chat.
Yeah, that is great. And you know, that just points to the beauty of the whiteboard, right? I've been in a lot of situations as well at trade shows and things where you have some brand new product and you go for it and then you're back to a whiteboard. That's great. Paul, thank you
storytelling.
So yeah, really glad to have you here. And actually your story is a great segue to our next panelist. Perhaps he or others at Apple were a part of that audience. So Matt Drance joins us as the owner of Bookhouse Software, but previously spent a lot of time within the Apple world, and even does so today. He was there when these phones first came out, and you know, when we all got our first iPhone and went to the App Store, he was a part of that that entire framework, how that worked, and the initial apps that were coming out for Apple. And then he actually became independent consultant and began to write all sorts of apps for different companies. Prior to that, has engineering experience at Calco and carries his degree from Cornell University. So Matt, it's great having you as well. And how are you holding up? Anything you'd share in terms of a software story? Were you at Pallav's meeting?
I as soon as you said this, maybe I was at that, but no, I don't think I was. But I've been at many like it. I'm holding up pretty well. I had some sniffles last week, and it's been 7 days since the sniffles stopped, so I think I'm okay. I have a lot of, can't talk about any of my Apple fiascos, but perhaps I've got plenty since I left. One of my first jobs after leaving Apple was building the first March Madness iPhone app, and which had, you know, the grid, the bracket for Selection Sunday, and then covered the games live. And the day before Selection Sunday, which is when they announce all the teams, everybody finally realized there are 64 teams in the tournament, but that's not true. There are actually 65, and there's something called a play-in game before the real tournament starts, where 2 teams compete for that 64th spot. And the day before Selection Sunday, we realized that the play-in game was not in the bracket in the app. And we had to figure out how to get it there in less than 24 hours. And remember, you have to submit something, get Apple to approve it, which back then could take as much as 2 weeks. So that was a very tense phone call.
Yeah.
And it was more than programming to figure out how to fix the problem, which is a very important lesson.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, we're in a much more challenging situation where we wish we just had an app that couldn't get in our 65th or last games, but now we're not playing basketball. So in context, you guys came through that okay, and these are tough times we're going through. You actually give us so thanks so much for joining, Matt. Looking forward to the conversation. It's a good segue even to Yuzhu, our next panelist. So we're delighted, in addition to Pallav and Matt having students, Yuzhu and George, who are both master's students, joining us so we can have both company and student perspective on this call, as we like to have on all of our webinars. And actually, Yuzhu joins us from, she's here in the Bay Area, but studying remotely at Georgia Tech, and has really great experience. And what I wanted to highlight, which I'm not sure it's here on the slide, but I've seen on her resume and in her portfolio, Yuzhu has her own very cool sports-related app or AI-based work. And Yuzhu, perhaps if you don't mind, maybe you could share a little bit about that work. It's very cool.
Sure. So I made a website showing us the trading strategies for an esports game. It's called FIFA 20. It's developed by EA. So you can play soccer games on your PS, and in that game you will trade player cards. Like you can buy Messi, you can buy Cristiano Ronaldo, and you want to buy them at the lowest price, but when is the price is the lowest? So there are some existing websites showing us the trend of the prices, but first, those websites had too many ads. And second, their selection of the player cards are not the best, in my opinion. So I made my own. That website, it's live if you want to take a look. It's called foodsmart.com. And we use React for the front-end framework, and we use Node and Express for the back-end framework. I started this website from scratch. I made the front-end, the back-end, the deployment, and the database all by myself. It's very challenging. Sometimes I just sit there, scratch my head, and don't know how to solve the problem for days. But finally, it's something you can click and take a look. And I did learn a lot from this personal project. And I also found during this special time, it may be harder for students to look for internships or jobs. So in case we are not currently having a job, we can do this kind of personal project, improve our skills, prepare ourselves when the market is better, when the shutdown is finished. Currently, my life is not greatly impacted by the COVID-19 because my master program is originally an online program, and my current internship allows me to do the work remotely. So I'm very lucky on this side, but my summer plan does get affected. It's very hard for me to get an offer for summer internships. Recently, the only offer I get is the renewal offer for my apartment lease. But I'm still being optimistic and doing my personal projects and learn some new technology.
Yeah, well, Yuzhu, listen, that is, I think you just laid out very quickly and very nicely, here's a strategy that works, right? You find a way to keep growing, to keep contributing. You hang tight, and then yeah, you find a way to pay the rent. So yeah, really glad you're here with us, Yuzhu, and thanks for sharing the story about that EA cool trading card program for soccer. That's terrific. In fact, I'm going to see if we can finish the thread, since there's been a little bit of a thread through our panelist group. So now introducing George. George is getting his master's in computer science at University of Pennsylvania. He's had a number of terrific internships, and you know, Yuzhu just talked a lot about pricing, George, in her app and the pricing of these cards. You've spent a fair bit of time in this financial space, and you've you know, done some coding that's related to the finance space, to perhaps to pricing. Perhaps you could share a little bit about those experiences that you've had. Welcome, George.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Well, regarding well, one example of an internship where which was in the financial space, that would be an internship that I did at Visa during the summer of 2018. It was in the Austin, Texas office, and my official position was a technical product management intern. And essentially, the project that I worked on there was I worked with 3 other interns on the company's new merchant portal. So essentially, this is a website where merchants can log in and, for example, pay their monthly invoice to Visa on a regular basis. Yeah, and essentially, our managers gave us pretty old code from like 2002 and in a very old language called JSP. And essentially, our task was to update this code using more modern frameworks like React, for example. Yeah, and I think you know, there's a number of reasons why this project is one of my favorites that I've worked on so far. I mean, number one, it was a team effort, so it was great to sort of delegate different responsibilities to each member of the team and sort of learn how to work together, and also you know, just learning a lot about front end frameworks like React and sort of you know, different ways in which they function and sort of their different applications. And yeah, I would say that at the end of the summer, we presented the new application to the team, and they were pleased with the results. So yeah, I would say that's one of my most successful internships thus far. So
yeah, terrific. Well, George, thanks again for joining. And why don't we go ahead now and take a look at the polling results. Hopefully everyone who had an interest in the poll was able to get the results in there. Let me go ahead and stop sharing this screen, and let me end the poll, and let me share the results. So taking a look at the results, it's interesting, you know, who do we have here? We have a good mix. I know we have a lot of students, so the largest group is software engineering, but we also have a lot of marketing students. We have a lot of other. For folks who selected other on the chat, feel free to let us know what your area is, but that's good for all of us to know who's on the webinar. What are people looking to get out of the webinar? What works and what doesn't work with AI, where AI is going. Those are really the lead responses. What's going to differentiate the companies that are really great at it? Any AI issues, ethics, accountability, human displacement. Those are topics people would like to hear about. Discussing AI's impact on healthcare. Pallav, in a few minutes, it'd be good to get your perspective on that. So that's helpful to see. You know, let me ask the group on this topic here, the AI issues, ethics, accountability, human displacement. Is this a topic, Pallav, that you've seen come up much over at Google? This idea of, you know, what's the impact of all of the computing on humans, or in your own thinking and in the work you've done in healthcare? Your perspective on this. How do you see AI being in the end a challenge for humans, a net gain, or how do we deal with this?
I think quite simply, it is a net gain. Obviously, every new advancement comes with some caveats that if you don't heed, there can be disadvantages. But Google fundamentally is an AI company. And if you've heard some of the speeches that our CEO, Sundar Pichai, has made, AI drives most of our products, whether it's your drive storage or the way we monitor temperature in our data centers. I don't think there's a particular application that is not affected by AI. And you specifically asked me about healthcare. There's a tremendous position for AI, because if you think about it, there's a need. Well, there are two types of sort of service providers in healthcare. Either you're an expert in something, or you're a beginner and you're trying to be an expert. So an expert would be your physician who's worked for 20 years and knows, you know, by the first look what's going on with the patient. And your beginner is the intern or the resident. And you would ideally want to scale the expert so that as a physician, they just don't see 40 patients a week. They are probably taking care of 400 in some virtual scaled up way. And you want the beginner to act as an expert as much as they can in the time of need. So
that's great.
AI can help in both of those fronts. And if we get into it, I can kind of describe how the workflow works, but taking a physician's expertise and deploying it across a population of 2,000 patients that, you know, a normal primary care doc has, is something that requires insights from that population that they can act on. You can't possibly be looking at 2,000 streams every hour of the day. So that's where AI comes in.
Yeah.
And for a novice, you know, how to deal with situations that they haven't seen before, that's where AI can help. So we can talk more about it, but that's basically the framework.
Yeah, you know what, and I think you make a great point there. It's very, it's very intuitive that AI, when it's working well, is going to amplify that expert opinion, and it's going to support the person who's not just there yet. And it's going to help them move in that direction when it's done well, when that's happening. So yeah, that's
Absolutely
great. Yeah, well said. I do want to come back to some of those points. Let's see a few more of these audience comments and responses. So where is AI strongest today? Image recognition is what the group said. And where it's weakest is, you know, if we go to the least selected answer, content distribution. Is this something that you, our panelists, would agree with, that image recognition is kind of where it seems strongest today?
100%. I also replied to that. I think if anybody wants a demonstration of that, if you just Google Cloud Vision API, you can actually drag any photograph from your desktop or from the web, and you can see how the Vision API classifies it. And it's incredible. Like I've wasted many minutes on this because if you give it like a layout of a bedroom, it can figure out where the nightstand is and, you know, which object is the ceiling fan. Or if you give it a group of people, like multiple 20, 30 people, it can figure out what the expression, like, is it joy, is it anger, is it for each one of those persons. So it's incredible how sophisticated it is. And we can talk about like how Google got there, but at least from an image recognition perspective, at least in the venture community and startup community, we're at parity with how a human would instantly classify something.
Mm. Yeah. Interesting. In terms of the next question of where are the industries where its impact is likely to be the greatest in the future, healthcare at the top of the list, and then also financial markets and services, which we've begun speaking about. And then finally, the last question, why is it that the audience is involved in AI? It's great potential to positively impact others. That's striking, actually. 80% of the people saying that's a reason I'm involved. That's terrific. And needing to use it to prioritize its application because it's affecting everything, along the lines of Pallav, what you were saying. So really great perspective from the audience. Anything, any other comments that the panelists would like to make? Anything that's surprising to you that you've seen here? Anything that you're hoping as panelists that we talk more about?
So I want to talk about what AI works and what AI doesn't work. So in my opinion, I want to talk more specifically about machine learning because that's what I'm studying right now. I find machine learning is very good at finding correlation, but it's weak at causality reasoning. So finding correlation means we can use machine learning models to solve some problems, some relatively easier problems, something that the decision can be made based on correlation. For example, recommendation system. If you like this clause, it's very possible you may like the other clause because that's how we see the trend, the data shows us. But it may be weak at very complicated problems where causality reasoning is at the center. For example, if I have a headache, I want to immediately know the root reason for this headache. It may, if you just use correlation, it may not be enough. You can see headache may be closely related to your head, but the root reason may be in your spine, maybe in your stomach or in your blood. So this kind of causality reasoning is where machine learning models not that strong at. That is my understanding based on my study. And that's why we use machine learning to do image recognition a lot because it's relatively easier compared to predictions, compared to complicated decision making. And a very funny example is if you give the machine learning model an image of a cat, but the cat has the texture similar to an elephant, the machine learning model will say this is an elephant because I see that the texture is very similar to elephant. It may overfitting that one single feature and make this wrong answer.
Yeah, I think you make a great point and observation of kind of the state of where AI is today. Stronger on correlation, weaker on causality. Let me push back to the panel and ask, is it just a matter of time, would this group say, until the data streams that are fed in to AI become more robust so that causality is better handled by AI, or would you say, no, I think, you know, to Pallav's earlier comment, it may be on par, image recognition may be on par today between AI and humans, but this causality, I just don't know that it will really get there, or it'll be really limited. What does the group think?
I'll let Matt go if he wants to.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not an expert in that particular domain, but I would say that, I mean, that would be a tremendous achievement if we're able to do that, because the correlation causation problem has been a problem forever. I mean, even in the human side of science, most of the scientific papers that are written, the studies that you read that get released, about 80% of people who have this also had that. It's always hard to distinguish whether or not you know what the nature of that correlation is. You know, and scientists spend their whole careers trying to figure out where that line is. So if we're able to use technology to achieve that with better accuracy and better speed, that would be remarkable. The question of whether or not we'll do it or when we'll do it, I think, is the better question for Pallav or one of the other actual domain experts. But I think it would be a really big deal.
Yeah.
I do think it's a very astute point, but I feel that AI is a means to doing something, and even in conventional healthcare sort of interventions, we are acting on correlations. To have perfect causality, you need end-to-end data. You need to have like the biomolecular of physiological pathway data to the way it interacts with the body to like the outcome. And in reality, till we present AI with the complete data set, all we're going to get is correlations based on what it already has. And I was going to make this point and at, you know, at some later point in the panel, but I feel like we talk about AI, but really AI depends on data underneath. And till we get the solid data foundation, what we have is general pattern recognition capability by machines. So if the output is suboptimal, it's probably not always the fault of the interpretation. It may actually quite likely be a fault of the data that we give it, which is why, you know, image recognition is at par in my view, because Google has had a chance to train the models on the world's images, like whether from the internet or from the Google Photos that we submit. That's why it's so incredibly accurate, because it has kind of seen the entire data set that humanity has generated in digital images. So I know it's a little bit of like a sort of like a ambitious statement for Google, but like that's why it works so well, because it's seen a lot.
Yeah.
And if we're able to give it that much data, we'll see better from AI. Output from AI.
You make a great point. It reminds me of like when the election results come in, and when you only have 2% of precincts reporting, you know, if that's the whole data feed you have, it's pretty hard to predict, you know, where you're going to go. And perhaps in image recognition, we have enough precincts reporting to say something meaningful and accurate. But in many other areas, it may be challenging to ever get enough clean and the required data. So yeah, it's good. George, anything you'd want to add on this point?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that the question of, you know, correlation versus causality, and like if or when, you know, we will ever reach a point where AI will sort of actually, you know, be able to provide reasons for, you know, certain phenomena. I mean, I think that's also very different among different domains. For example, my kind of domain of focus is natural language processing. And I mean, I guess I would also love to get Paulav's thoughts on this within the healthcare domain. But, you know, I would say, well, I'm not entirely sure, but it's possible that image recognition is sort of more, I guess, powerful than natural language processing in certain particular applications. But, you know, for example, like within machine translation, I guess that's a good example. You know, you can type in a particular phrase and translate it from English to French. But in certain other applications of NLP, you know, even state-of-the-art models can't really achieve such a high accuracy on tasks like question answering, for example. And yeah, so I think for different domains, it will take a different amount of time for, you know, to reach that level of, hey, will we be able to achieve causality for this particular domain? So yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Pallav, I wanted to come back to healthcare, since that's an area where certainly it's top of mind for all of us right now. I know that's your area of domain expertise, and it's also where the audience feels AI may be most impactful in the future. Could you share a little bit about how you see, where has AI been most impactful thus far in healthcare? How, if at all, is it impacting the management of the current situation we're in? And what are you most excited about in the future? I know what you shared earlier about the training different types of physicians and amplifying the expert and training the, you know,
Sure.
Intern. We'd love to hear more.
Sure. The way I think about AI's impact in healthcare is in like a layered cake formation. And I think everybody's familiar with the middle piece, which is let's create a model for predicting sepsis in ICU patients, right? So we read and kind of relate to aspects where the machine was given certain data and it has come up with the logic to either predict something or recommend something. But I think that's like the middle piece of the cake. There's one piece that's below it, which is what I was trying to get to, is the data. And AI, and I'll explain, and the piece above it is the workflow. So AI is not just in the middle piece, it's also in the data management platform, the foundation, because ingesting the dirty, multivariable, sort of multi-formatted data from the world and making sense of it, normalizing it, is itself AI. So if I get allergy from 3 different hospitals, and I also get an allergy feed from the purchase you made at CVS, interpreting all of that to be a defined concept of a seasonal allergy from a particular pollen. And likewise, you know, many other sort of data streams that are varied in the real world, but have to be combined to some semantic form, canonical truth, that requires the machine to understand 1,000 variations of how the data can format itself. So that itself is the AI. So, and I'll talk about like what's most applicable in healthcare. And on the top, there's workflow. So we all kind of know about chatbots, right? Conversational AI. George talked about natural language processing. Taking the logical model, which is in the middle piece, and actually doing something with it is also AI. So understanding that you just spoke something about, you know, your medication refill order, and then pushing that to the pharmacy to say, hey, you know, Joe's talking about his medication refill for the next 90 days. That whole end-to-end sort of layer is what I see as the full stack of AI, not just like the model that we think and read about. In healthcare, I would say that the model, the middle piece is where the papers are being published, because that's like the most PR worthy part of AI. But there's some real progress that has been made on the data management platform, where most of the sort of public cloud companies and have been able to, and this is particularly prominent in imaging, because images are basic. So radiology, I mean, so imaging in my world is radiology images, but they are it's computer vision, it's images. So getting radiology images from multiple places and creating one canonical format for that is it's called a vendor neutral archive. It's there, like it's a solution that many hospitals have deployed. And for example, for COVID, on the top level workflow, there are chatbots that you can now converse with to figure out if you have COVID symptoms or not. So healthcare is kind of shining silently on the top and the bottom half of the AI stack. And the middle is great, like, but it's not, it lacks from having complete data about something. Every now and then you hear about a particular health condition that has really figured out the model. So if you guys have, you can search for it, but Google published about diabetic retinopathy, if you've ever heard about it. That is a model that has been proven to be as good or better than human ophthalmologists in detecting diabetes in retinal images. So, but it's a very niche use case, and I doubt how much can it scale outside in the real world.
Yeah.
So that's the complete way I think about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's good. Let's. I wanna get some perspective for the students who are here on the call, thinking about what is it that employers in the healthcare field or more broadly are paying most attention to as they engage with candidates who are like George, like Yuzhu, studying AI. What is most important? And here I'm really asking Matt, I'm asking Pallav, as candidates come in who are looking to join great companies, like companies you have been a part of, what's top of mind, and what should they be thinking about in terms of how to present themselves and what the employers has as top of mind? It is a tough environment, as Yuzhu was saying earlier, and so those kinds of tips I think are really helpful to the audience.
Well, you don't have to be in this field for very long to understand that things change so incredibly quickly. You know, I mean, AI is going to continue to be a sort of a foundational piece of technology for years to come, but it's not going to be the next big thing for forever. There's always something new that comes out and comes along. So I would say, especially to the younger folks who are trying to get into the workforce, I think that the first and foremost thing that you have to present is a willingness to learn and to change your assumptions and to grow, because whatever sort of tricks and skills that you've acquired over the last 12 to 18 months are not going to be evergreen. You're going to constantly be needing to either adapt to changes in the place that you're already an expert, or completely move on to something else, because the thing that you're an expert on is either completely commoditized or no longer relevant at all. So, when I've interviewed over the last 20 years, when I've talked to, as an interviewer, as somebody who's hiring, obviously there needs to be competency in the thing that's being hired for, but beyond that, you want to be able to find somebody who's gonna continue to contribute even when this stuff that we're talking about doesn't matter anymore. So I think that especially can be a strength for people who might be anxious about whether or not they're gonna have the right answers in an interview. Figure out a way to corral that and convert it into a strength on your part, where you overcome a lack of an obvious answer by demonstrating that you're not intimidated by it, and that you're going to be able to learn and adapt as needed.
I like that. So things are changing, and people have the ability to take what they have and translate it, their aptitude that can scale as the world changes. You're trying to keep an eye out for that. It's good. Pallav, yeah, what were you going to say?
Yeah, along the same lines, but I'll put it slightly differently. I think, well, actually, before I say anything else, your GitHub repository and the work you've done, like Yuzhu has, done some personal projects. That's like the prime evidence you can put out there for being evaluated by companies, regardless of how you perform in the interview or somewhere else. Your code speaks for itself. So if you're in the engineering side, just always work on projects and put it out there. I think when I interview, especially for a field like AI, which is so new that you can't really rely on like a degree or an institute to give you a level of confidence. It's all so new that, you just have to evaluate the person. I see somebody as either an artist or a scientist when it comes to new fields like this. And an artist takes like what already exists and sort of puts it together to create some beautiful form or shape, right? So like I told you about the Google Vision API, or, speech to text or NLP, there are horizontal capabilities not horizontal, I should say, there are Lego block capabilities in AI that you can just put together to do something.
Yeah.
That's what I would call the artist. But there is also a scientist where you can create new capabilities. Now, I don't have sufficient depth to give you examples of like what new capabilities one can create, but I imagine there's a PhD AI somewhere that has come up with a new way of doing neural networks in 10 seconds. And, that would be the scientist that I would want to hire. But mostly I think the field is 90% artists, because you have tons of engineers from Google, Microsoft, Amazon, just spinning out Lego blocks for somebody to put together in an AI application. You need to just use that and take the workflow value proposition forward. So for COVID example, in Italy, I just got an email 2 days ago. One of our partners has used Google Cloud AI capabilities to extract the entities from the discharge summaries that were done in Italy for medical records, to see what doctors had handwritten in the medical records. So there was information from COVID patients that doctors had just scribbled in their medical records that we didn't know about. So they used AI, NLP, text extraction capabilities to pull that information out. And I feel like that's a great artistic output from what capabilities already existed. So if that was like a personal project that somebody did, that'd be like a instant hire for me.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. And that's one thing I'm really enjoying in my role here with Wonderbench, we've been talking to many software engineering candidates. You do hear a lot of people with really interesting problems that they're looking to solve. For example, I was speaking to a student on a campus where parking was a problem. And you know, no one can get a car to get to their class. No one can park to get to a class. And so they came up with, you know, an app connected to how might we get access to people's driveways, and might the residents on certain streets near my university be willing to engage. And they started a project in that realm to begin to kind of, you know, figure that out. And it's not deployed yet, but those are the kinds of examples of people just being ambitious and saying, I think we have a way to uncover more opportunities. So yeah, perseverance and diligence goes a long way, like you were saying with Yuzhu's example. One comment to everyone in the audience. I'd like to encourage you to add your questions to our frequently asked question list, as we will be getting to that shortly. But first I have a few more questions of my own. I wanted to ask George and Yuzhu, what are you looking for in employers, right? You've had different experiences with employers, you're talking to employers. What do you think sets apart the employers who are most attractive to strong students like yourselves who are pursuing opportunities? What are you looking for?
So for myself, I put a lot attention to the culture of the company. So as a student, we are new, we are junior engineers. When we enter a company, we hope this company can give us the opportunity to learn the new technology, to practice what we have learned in school. Just like Pallav said, he wants artists who can put all the Lego pieces together to create new things. So as a engineer, as a candidate, are we encouraged to do this kind of things, or we are just only needed to follow the routine to repeat all those works that have been done before? We just repeat everything. Then I cannot create new stuff. I cannot be an artist. I cannot learn that much. So for that part, I do care about when I look for jobs.
Yeah, great point. That's really, it's interesting. Pallav is looking for creative people that are going up the side, and you're looking for an organization that has a culture, right? All these really important human characteristics, even, you know, that are different from kind of the essential nature of AI, that some of these really special human capabilities that are important on both sides. It's great. George, what are your thoughts? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with Yuzhu on the culture point, and I would also add that, well, I guess this is similar, and this doesn't even necessarily have to do with companies that incorporate AI necessarily, but I would say that a company definitely needs like a set of values that they stick to, and you know, even in times of crisis, like you know, the time that we are currently experiencing. You know, previously I've done several internships where I didn't really feel like the company was necessarily kind of, you know, always sticking to its principles 100%, you know, and sort of, you know, kind of sticking together and sort of helping each other out, I suppose, and, you know, putting the employees first. And I would say that, again, especially in times like these, I think it's especially important to sort of have, you know, kind of a mission statement, I suppose, and, you know, and sort of have all of the employees kind of make sure to follow that. And yeah, and I would say, yeah, that's one thing that personally I am looking for in, you know, the next company that I would be interning at and working at full time is, you know, can the company kind of coalesce all of its employees behind a unified purpose, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and given the result to that polling question about people are looking to make an impact, you want to understand what that impact is. What's our mission? What are we going after? Because that's why I'm working. Yeah, that's really good. Other comments on in the first 90 days for you know, people landing jobs. And let's also talk about this virtual situation. You know, actually, we'll take that first. So Is software engineering and is an AI an area where you think, especially if COVID-19 persists and initial work needs to be done in a virtual environment, you know, employers fall on both sides of that, whether it can work, you know, virtually or whether people just have to be together. Pallav and Matt, it'd be good to get your perspective on that. And then whether it's virtual or whether it's face-to-face, what's most important in the first 90 days? Like what's the initial experience you're looking for that's going to help you say, yeah, we're in a great spot, this person's doing well? Welcome your perspective on both of those questions.
Pallav, you go first.
Sure. I would say that, you know, self-driven, you know, initiative is what I would evaluate the person, especially given this, the new circumstances of our working conditions. I think a lot of people come into work expecting to be sort of onboarded in some way, and for fields as new as AI and, you know, the huge problem landscape that we have, I would give extra points to somebody who jumps in and says, you know, ooh, can I help with that? Or, you know, can I join this team? Or I have a thought about this. Rather than being given the work, they point out where they can help. Yeah. And I think it's especially applicable to something like AI because we all are trying to figure it out. In fact, I think that is one of the weaknesses of AI today is it's a very supply side thinking. Like we know what the solution is. It's going to be a CNN, you know, a neural network. What is your problem? And that puts us at a deficit to begin with in actually making an impact because we already have a hammer. We already have a hammer and we're trying to find the nail. Mm-hmm. So I really admire people who come in with this problem mindset of, you know, I know a lot about this and I may not know 100% about AI, but I will help you find the solution for this problem. So that's what I would look for, a problem-oriented thinking and initiative to, you know, get self-started.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. All right, Matt, what are your thoughts?
I think Pallav hit on something that's really, really important, which is especially in those first 90 days, you know, if this is your first job after being a student from undergrad and then high school, middle school, elementary school, I mean, you've spent your whole life more or less being trained to sit and wait to be told what you're doing or what you're learning. And that's not happening anymore. It's not going to happen once you're out there. I mean, it will to an extent, but not nearly as much as the way that you've been conditioned for most of your lives. And that's true at any point when you enter the workforce for the first time. I remember the abject horror of going into the office and just being given a couple things and having to figure out the rest of it myself. And it's jarring, and it's going to be more jarring now, unfortunately, without a personal interactive office environment. If you're going to be confined to just talking to people on Zoom or Facetime or Hangouts or whatever it is, the self-starting attitude that Paul is talking about is going to be absolutely critical, even if it's just the initiative to ask for help. You know, that the initiative, which a lot of people might not be inclined to have, find that courage and that energy to raise your hand and ask a question, reach out to a colleague or a manager. And as far as the first 90 days goes, the personal aspect of establishing some level of trust and communication with your manager is going to be really critical. You know, it's not just about being given tasks or priorities or anything like that, especially in a time like this, when people are not bumping into each other in hallways or just being dragged into meetings where they can more freely and improvisationally interact. The need to be more proactive about raising concerns, asking questions, asking for clarification, and then also finding the balance where, you know, there's an old saying, which is you must try and you must ask, and then you must ask. You know, you don't want to waste other people's time with questions that you could find the answers to yourselves. But there comes a point where you're trying to help yourself over and over again and getting nowhere, And now you're wasting the rest of the organization's time doing nothing. And you need to learn how to find that balance, to lean on your colleagues and your senior, superior co-workers to get yourself over a hurdle so that you can get back to helping the team.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, Pallav, go ahead.
I just have one quick tip. I feel like when people join as interns, they look at the fact that they're given some nondescript work or generic work as a negative. I actually think it's a positive because that gives you a license to actually go in any direction. So my tip is always scroll through all the email, like long email threads that have, you know, response to response, so you understand how it started, because you may be able to help with like something that came up 20 days ago in that thread. And, you know, if you have access to file folders, just like scan through everything in the team folder, right? If you have access to other people's calendars, try to understand what meetings they have. You know, they may be having a one-on-one with a team that you already know something about from previous experience. So I would say with that sort of generalist's license, you can actually do more, even though you're given specific assignments. And that's how you would shine, is on some unexpected front.
Yes.
It's most likely because you know you can match it with your skill set. So
really good. That's kind of adding some colored commentary on Matt's try, right? Try and ask and ask. Those are things you do to try. I like that. Hey, I do see this has been a great discussion, and I know time is gonna quickly slip away here, but I do want to respond to the questions. If there are other questions from the audience, please chime in. But Sophia, why don't you go ahead and read the first question?
Yeah, all right. First question. I was wondering if there are any worries about job displacement in the field of healthcare in the future, as certain roles that previously required years of expensive school and licensure are replaced by AI technology, for example, radiology.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I can take that. I can take a shot at that. I'm passionate about answering this because I feel like regardless of the technology wave, whether it's AI or internet or personal computing or mobile, whatever, I think you have to fundamentally understand that the value moves somewhere else. People get displaced, but then there's an entire new greenfield set of things that we hitherto didn't know that appear. So yes, radiologists are not going to look at simple chest x-rays anymore, but we already had 300 images coming from a digital mammogram as of last 10 years. No radiologist had time in their 15 minutes to look over 300 images of a single breast. So AI will surface the 5 that they need to look at, but you still need the radiologist to look at those 5. So you're going to see that proportionally, as radiologists stop doing what they were doing in the last 30 years, they're going to have new things that they need to do, which take less time or paid more. So yes, you will continue to have human cognition be required, but machines will start taking up some of the previously human work. I don't think this is unique to radiologists. This is kind of like everywhere in healthcare. There's a commodity tail to everything that we do in a service transaction that either a chatbot can do or a algorithm can do, but then humans will start doing something else. So this is I don't subscribe to like, you wouldn't require a human in future to do X. You may not, but then humans will be required to do Y. And that's how we keep moving.
Yeah,
I completely agree. There's always work to do. That's never an issue. We're saying AI, but the term automation has been used constantly in our field for years and years and years, especially in areas of QA where Yuzhu has worked in the past. There's tons of QA work that needs to be done and that could easily not be done by a human being. The really great QA people are not the people who are clicking and dragging and doing the tests. What the great QA people and what we need them to be doing is figuring out the places and the ways of things that need to be tested. We don't need them to actually execute the tests with their hands. So I'm completely agreeing with Pallav, but I'm pointing out, just so that people are not concerned about this issue of job displacement, it's just like Pallav said, the work will move somewhere else, and it's usually even higher up the value chain, which means that you yourself are going to be more successful once you adapt to that. There's always work to do. So this issue of automation or doing simple tasks or repetitive tasks more efficiently, in my opinion, is not something that should bother anybody. It's an opportunity for you to grow.
Great point.
Yeah.
Sophia, I see as, Yuzhu, go ahead.
Yes, I also want to add something here. I totally agree with Matt and Pallav. So we recently we discussed a lot about whether human will be replaced by machine learning and AI. But I think there may be some jobs replaced by AI, but there may be new occupations that we have never thought about before that is being created by this technology. Just like in the past, we need a lot of workers to produce clothes, but now we do not need that many workers. But then we need clothes designers. We need scientists who do research on new materials. So I think it's just the same thing for AI and for machine learning.
Very good. Sophia, I see there's another question.
Yes. Do you think AI should be used in healthcare like Ray Dalio used his software to make accurate predictions about the market and his hedge fund? In other words, making it a constant project to be robust, but not cut out the human intervention, because human thought process can actually be beneficial when outcomes are ambiguous.
Absolutely. I think so, but I would encourage you to think about this in not the grandiose sort of like, let's predict if a patient in ICU is going to be discharged or die. I think about it in a less in a more simplistic way. Like, should we refill this patient's prescription for the next 90 days? That totally could be a prediction based on how well their past history has been and what age group they're in. I think you wouldn't be able to cut out human intervention because we are fundamentally, for the near future, incapable to give a comprehensive data-based picture of a human body and how it works. And even if we do that, how a human interacts with their entire environment, we just don't have that enough data points on that for a machine to understand the complete picture. That intuition and sort of empirical understanding is what a human physician has because of their training. So back to our previous question, yes, we should use AI to predict the commodity part of that healthcare service transaction, but you will always need a human for the more artistic part of medicine, where there are multiple diseases and a person lives in a particular zip code which has other factors that might affect their health, and AI can't accommodate all those viewpoints.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? I can see we're at the top of the hour. This has been a great discussion. I will invite each of the panelists to give one sentence, any final words, any guidance to any pep talk, quick line that you want to share with the audience as we close out here. So George, so what would you say?
In terms of pep talk, or I guess advice for the future, yeah, I mean, I would say that the most important quality to have right now, especially again during these coronavirus times, is to have the ability to adapt to any given situation, and whether it's within the professional field or in any other context, I think adaptability is very important, especially as we navigate these quite uncertain times.
Yeah, very good. Yuzhu.
So my advice is being creative to find new ways to present yourself during this special time. You may not have the ability, the chance to do a internship, but you can post some technical articles in Medium, and in the future it can be a proof that you have this kind of technical abilities. So there are always some new ways to do the same thing during this special time.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Well said. Pallav.
Yeah, I would say, this is a special time in human history, not because of COVID. I feel like software engineering and computers is the only field in STEM that you can be a world authority without having a degree from an institution. So it's a superpower for you to go get. I would say just question status quo and keep working at it. You can be an authority without anybody's help.
Yeah, thank you, Pallav. And Matt.
Thank you for giving me time to come up with one sentence. Always ask yourself how your work improves other people's lives. Thank you. Good luck, everybody.